Welcome to Preach, a podcast from America Media on the art of Catholic preaching. I'm your host, Ricardo da Silva, a Jesuit priest from South Africa, associate editor at America Media, and also an associate pastor of the Church of St. Francis Xavier in New York City. In each episode, we take you into the minds and hearts of some of the finest preachers in the Catholic Church. We listen to their homilies, learn what makes them great, and draw inspiration to keep preaching the good news. This week on Preach, and quite by surprise, I'm joined by Bill Gabriel, an Augustinian friar of the province of St. Thomas of Villanova, ordained in 2021. We actually asked Bill to speak to us on Preach before we even knew that we'd have an Augustinian Pope. So it's a real joy to have Bill with us. Bill is a New Hampshire native. He moved to Philadelphia in 2010 to study theology at Villanova University, something else he has in common with our Pope. He joined the Augustinians in 2015 and then earned an MDiv degree from the Catholic Theological Union in Chicago, yet another connection with our Pope, who is a CTU graduate. He now serves as head of mission and ministry at Malvern Prep, a boys' Augustinian school serving grades 6 through 12. He is a former parochial vicar at St. Thomas of Villanova Parish and a campus minister, teacher, and coach. He is, as you might know by now, passionate about Villanova and sports in New England. He loves hiking, cycling, running, and the shore. It is a joy to welcome you, Bill, our very first Augustinian guest on Preach.
Thank you. It's great to be here and humbled to be a part of this podcast.
It's truly a joy to have you. I thought we would start, we can't go anywhere else, but to ask, do you know Pope Leo? Have you met him before?
I have met him twice, pretty briefly. When I was in the order and joining the order, he had become bishop in Peru, so he spent most of his time in Peru. But he would come back for ordinations in the East Coast of the U.S. and had a chance to meet him. Very gentle, humble man who we knew as Bob, and he introduced himself as Bob. So it's we're all sort of riding high and in shock in a good, beautiful way since the election.
Wonderful. So, many are asking the question, how do we interpret Pope Leo? Who is Pope Leo? But you're an Augustinian in the same way that I'm a Jesuit, right? And we live our charism in a very particular way, and there are particular ways in which our charism informs who we are, regardless of who we are. So I wanted to ask you, not only how do we understand Pope Leo, but really, how do you understand the charism of your order, the Order of St. Augustine, the Augustinian order, and how that affects the way that you see the church and the world?
It's a good question. There's a great emphasis on community life in the Augustinian tradition. Augustine knew that he could not get to God or even have a very positive spiritual experience unless he had others along the way who were going to help him, shape him, challenge him, share a meal with him, pray with him. In fact, when Augustine was a bishop, he decided to build a community in the bishop's residence, which was very unusual for that time. So he really knew the value of living with other people. And I think that shapes a lot of what we do. We prioritize that in many ways in terms of how we prioritize prayer together, meals together, recreation time together. And when you're living with other people, there's blessings and gifts, but also there can be moments of rubbing up against each other and the friction that might cause and room for growth. And Augustine would always, in his rule, invite us to forgive, to ready to heal harms, always to grow and challenge each other to greatness as God would want us to be. So I think that shapes a lot of what we do in trying to build community where we are in our apostolates and our ministries, wherever that might be, knowing that that's something that we feel called to personally as friars.
It's interesting that you talk about this connection to community, because sometimes I've heard people in ministry or people I work with say something about a Jesuit that I live with, that sounds a little bit different to my lived experience. And I think there is something for us often in hearing how others experience our brothers that can help us to grow and really start to see each other in a different light, and how this experience can affect our ministry and perhaps even, especially, our preaching.
Absolutely. And I think the willingness to let others help you grow in the spiritual life, grow closer to God, knowing that they're praying for you, and then that they're using their gifts, as unique as they are, in their ministries and touching lives with the good news in their own way. It's amazing to see what God can do with all of us and how we can help each other grow. And I would say also, one of the feedback we'll get as Augustinians is, and I'm sure you get this as Jesuits, is you sound so down to earth. You sound so relatable. And I think that's because we're living with other people who are shaping our experience of relationship. And that's something so real for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's just made me a better community member as well. On the note of community, why don't you tell us this homily that you have prepared for us? Who do you have in mind as you prepared this text?
So for the audience for this particular homily is 6 through 12 at Malvern Prep here. It's a boys' school where I'm assigned in ministry. And as you can imagine, needing to engage quickly and with some sort of ability to keep attention is very high priority. And so one of the things that we've noticed is if you can preach there, this homily can then work at the parish setting and elsewhere. And I think that's usually the audience I have in mind with the young people, and what do they need to hear and what are they capable of hearing? And I think that's the audience I've crafted for this homily.
Yeah, I have a parishioner recently deceased, and she used to say, if you can speak to children, you can speak to adults. If you can speak to adults, it doesn't necessarily mean you can speak to children. So I think, knowing that you have these young people and their attention bodes well for the skill and the gift of preaching. What are the readings we're looking at for this 6th Sunday in Easter, Year C?
The gospel for the 6th Sunday of Easter, Year C, is from John chapter 14, verses 23 to 29. And it's Jesus's farewell discourse to his disciples, to his friends. And he's choosing very carefully what he wants to leave them with. As we know, when you know it's coming to an end in some degree, you choose very carefully what that looks like. And so he will say things around sending the Holy Spirit, around do not be afraid, that I will not leave you. I will remind you of all that I've told you. And I'm going to the Father, so you should rejoice at that. So that's the spirit of the farewell discourse that we encounter right before ascension into heaven.
I can't wait to hear how you've thought about crafting this message, and especially how you've shaped this message to speak to those in 6th through 12th grade. That's a tall order to speak across that many ages. So I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.
We will now hear Bill Gabriel's homily for the 6th Sunday in Easter, Year C, especially recorded for Preach.
What's the word? My friar brothers and my friary would ask each other as we would sit down at the kitchen table after morning prayer each day, what's the word? Did you get it yet? It's become sort of a routine, an extension of our morning, with cereal and coffee cups, sitting down and opening up on our phones this popular game, Wordle, on 6 chances to guess a 5-letter word. What's the word? Did anyone get it yet? We would ask each other every morning. And admittedly, though I excel at other things, this is not one that I excel at. It often ends with others getting far more close with their guesses, and then I have to go over to school, and it's just it doesn't work out. But what's the word? Today we hear the risen Christ prepared to say goodbye to his friends, saying, "Whoever loves me will keep my word." Here, Jesus poses a question to us. What's my word? He gives us clues about what this word is when he says, "Do not let your hearts be troubled or afraid. The Holy Spirit will be sent to you in my name to remind you all that I have told you." And perhaps what is most frequently said by the risen Christ and what he gives and leaves with his friends is the word peace. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Luckily, 5 letters. Perfect for Wordle. Such a word echoes throughout the world these days. Now, the one that Pope Leo has spoken first as he emerged from the balcony of St. Peter's, peace be with you. And he extended this greeting of peace to enter our hearts, to reach our families, to all people, wherever they are, to all peoples, to the whole earth, saying, peace be with you. It's a word that has shaped his messages since then. Our brother, Pope Leo. Peace to Ukraine and Gaza, saying never again war, building bridges, a disarming peace, a peace that knows no bounds, that works through social and personal hurt, grief, stress, conflict, from fear toward communion. It's a peace made possible from knowing that we, though the risen Christ is ascending, will never be alone, because he sends us the Holy Spirit and we will have each other. What's the word? Peace. A couple years ago, I found myself a little homesick studying as a student in formation in Chicago at the same theological school as Pope Leo, feeling a bit out of it. I spontaneously decided to attend at a discounted price this Chicago Symphony, which I never go to, but it was something different. It got me out of the friary, and I was all for it. It was a change in scenery. I chose an empty row, an aisle seat. There's 10 open seats to my left. Perfect for trying to get away from other people. An elderly woman taps me on the shoulder and proceeds to choose the chair next to mine in this whole empty row. And I'm thinking, oh no. Prior to the performance, she started asking the questions. Are you a student? I answered yes. She probed about which subject. I said, well, I'm a theology student. And then she said without hesitation, are you studying to be a priest? Surprised by her jump in questioning, I said, yeah. Her expression changed to something much more serious, though. Just her and I in this row, and she looked at me, now with tears in her eyes. And she said, my family, though. My family's been hurt by the church. For failure, loss, hurt and suffering, betrayal by this church that she called her home, manifested in her tears and sorrow, all sat next to me in this seat. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The only words that I could seem to say, frozen, if you will, in that moment. Sitting in silence as the performance continued, during one of the last songs, arm on the armrest between us, I felt a nudge and began to move my arm in case she wanted the armrest. It was a shared one in between us, and only in that moment, as I moved my arm off the armrest, for her to reach out and grab my hand and hold it for the final song. No words. Both of us alone, yet holding each other in what felt like the complexity of the reality of the cross and the promise one day of resurrection, of communion. suffering not erased, and wounds not completely removed, but yet feeling a little less alone. This moment is the peace that Christ shares. This moment is the peace that Pope Leo shares with all of us, with your heart and mine. For Pope Leo, as an Augustinian friar, knows this well and inspires us as an Augustinian community to remember this also. For he quoted a St. Augustine when he said, "For what I am for you terrifies me, but what I am with you comforts me. For you I am a bishop, with you I am a Christian. With you brings peace." Whose hand is God asking you to hold this day? What pain or worry needs transforming? Peace be with you, brothers. Peace be with you, Pope Leo echoed in the square of St. Peter's with his Augustinian heart. Peace be with you, a word that echoes in all of our hearts. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Jesus shares with us. Did you get the word yet? What's the word? Peace.
That was Bill Gabriel for Preach. Wow. I think I want to start with how your homily affected me first. So, you had this colloquial and ordinary kind of example with the wordle that really brought us into your homily. It made us feel, or at least made me feel, yeah, I've done this before. I've looked for the word. And then you took us to the symphony, and that completely changed the gravity, perhaps even of your message, but also the way that it affected me, and I'm sure the way it'll affect our listeners. Can we talk about how you structured that? Because I do think that was deliberate, and maybe how you think about this in terms of your preaching whenever you're crafting a homily.
Yes. One of the things that I'll try to do, and I think as Augustinians will try to do, is, and I think any good preacher, is to have some sort of relatable hook in which they get a glimpse of something that feels real to them. And so, for example, we will talk about us living together as friars, and what does that look like, and what are some of the things that we do, and the banter that goes back and forth, and to show, especially the boys here that we're with, hey, we're doing this too. And one of the things that I noticed too is that these boys will, during homeroom, they'll be playing Connections and Wordle and mini crossword, and it's really kind of a funny thing to notice. So knowing the community, I knew that would be something I'd say, oh my gosh, they play this too, as a hook, and a lighthearted hook. I mean, it's hard to start from a very heavy point, but then the hope is, once you can pull them in, with a sense of, all right, this is relatable. This is something that I can hear, I can understand, to then bring it to the scriptures. This is where this is coming from. I'm not just randomly talking about this nice kind of fun game that we play. And then what I've noticed with our community is there can be an often, I would say, like a shallow end experience of faith often, where it's something like, all right, peace, it sounds nice, it's great, I say peace, I shake my brother's hand in the pew at the mass, and that's my peace, right? It's something that we've done so much that it can almost be cheapened. And so the goal then in crafting this homily was to say, this is actually something that Christ is saying that's deep. Like, it goes from Gaza to your heart, to holding someone's hand in the least expected places. And it doesn't mean that you're going to be fixed or 100%, taken care of, as if there are no problems in your life, but there can be peace, is the hope, knowing that these boys are dealing with depression and anxiety and stresses of college decisions and other material that just is bombarding them constantly, that peace can come even if you feel a bit wounded. And that's the gift of the risen Christ, and the gift of the peace that's offered. So though it does seem, I admit, it was a risk in saying, is this too deep? The hope was to say, hey, you can hold someone's hand too. And there's peace in that. So that's a hope, at least. Whether it works, we'll find out.
I think it does work. I mean, but also I think it had depth and maintained the relatability. Let's continue with this peace, though, and maybe not only peace, but go back to Pope Leo. We're recording this, I think it's like, barely a week since Pope Leo was elected, but there's already a phrase that he is using in his discourses, and it's a disarmed and disarming peace, or an unarmed and disarming peace. And then he spoke about that with journalists again at the start of this week, an unarmed or a disarmed and disarming communication, conversation. I think that's a really good way for us to think about what we're doing from the pulpit, right? That we are sort of putting down all our weapons, not using our words as weapons, but disarming in the sense that it allows us to drop our defenses and create a space for welcome, for conversation. Pope Francis would say encounter. What do you think? How does that sound to you? And how can we build greater disarmament and encounter in our own conversation from the ambo?
It's a great question. And I am loving the phrase that he's been using as well, and nod to it a little bit and try to at least to expose them. One of the things that as Augustinians that we're very trained in is always preach grace, not duty. In fact, we would have a preaching professor who would say, do not say the word must or say the word should in your homilies, because people don't respond to that, right? It doesn't invite them into something deep, which is what grace is all about. And Augustine, as a doctor of grace, is very much so about invitation into relationship. So I think even how we preach from the pulpit, as you say, Ricardo, is very much so. How are we using invitation? How are we reimagining something that might be possible that maybe they're not able to see yet, but we're painting a picture that's, here's what it could look like if we moved in this way, when you're ready, if you're able, with the grace of the Holy Spirit to do this. And so I think, even at this level of an education setting, I do think there's a lot of need for forgiveness, which is what's required when you live with other people, and giving each other grace in the midst of that, and presuming their goodwill at the end of the day. And also showing an affective appreciation, really building each other up in a way that says, I'm not just going to talk to you when I have an issue, but when I want to celebrate you and your gifts too, which might be different than mine, and all the more needed in our community to build our community and grow. It's one of the amazing things that I encountered here. I was off campus when Pope Leo was elected. I was actually accompanying a friend for chemo, a brother of mine, and we're watching this live stream when the white smoke came, and this nurse, who is not religiously minded at all, was like, what are you doing? So she's now come in. Now she's watching with us as he's lying in the bed. And then the announcement came. She's overjoyed. She goes, I don't even know what's happening, but this sounds so amazing. And then I got an email from a student who was on campus, and the student says to me, and he's not your first guy who's gonna volunteer or be that vocal, prominent, faith-filled figure. He writes me an email, and the subject line says, and it has a picture of Bob Prevost. It says, "Is this your boy?" That's what he said. To which I replied via email, "I wouldn't say he's my boy, but he is our brother." To which this young man, again, not religiously inclined, said, "Well, I guess that makes him my brother too." And I thought to myself, what a gift if that can be part of the disarming piece. If we can see each other as sisters and brothers, much more than, what might separate, but what might bring us closer. And I think that's the gift that perhaps for the American church will experience, but just anyone can connect with their restless heart. If we see each other for being our brother and our sister. And maybe that's the place to start.
Yeah. And, again, this is Pope Leo. It sounds like we're speaking about somebody who's been in office for years and years, but he quoted, I think it was St. Augustine, "With you I am a Christian, for you I am a bishop." Again, there's that closeness and that proximity, but there's also that responsibility of shepherding. If we go back to an image that we've had in the scriptures the past couple of weeks or the past Sundays with the Good Shepherd, how can we balance in our preaching that responsibility with that duty of care and equality?
Yeah, so I'm still very much so learning. So I would ask you, Ricardo, no, I'm just kidding. I'm still, as the friars call me, the baby priest for the province.
I think we were ordained around the same time, right? 2021.
Yes, yeah.
That's when I was ordained. So, I've maybe been in the society. This is now my 17th year, but I was ordained in 21 as well.
Oh, very cool. So in Augustine's rule, and this is something that's really formed in us as friars, and this is something that I think helps us do community well as best we can, is Augustine will say, notice those who have the burden of leadership, and give them really the benefit of the doubt, right? Give them the grace of knowing that they have to carry a lot. And there is a burden to that accountability and that responsibility. And so I think that's something that as a shepherd for any community and for anyone, to be able to say, yeah, this is, you're speaking what is the good news out of love. And sometimes that can be challenging. It can be a comforting word. Sometimes it can be a challenging word. I mean, for example, that woman's gift to me was much more than I could have given her. Her holding my hand in a moment of me feeling homesick was more than I could possibly need when I was trying to avoid people, right? In the moments that we tend to do. So it has to be mutual from a sense of, all right, let's live in such a way that's authentic and credible, but that also admits it's a humbling experience to notice when we don't get it right. In that vulnerability, even as Pope Leo has said from that very first moment, because that quote that he doesn't quite say in the address is really from Augustine, "What I am for you terrifies me. What I am with you comforts me." And so that to me is him saying, pray for me. Like, I don't have it all together. And that's a very Augustinian move to say, hey, I'm on this journey with you and we can go further if we're going to grab each other's hands and arms and go together.
That's so beautiful because it also speaks to the line of continuity with Pope Francis, right? Pope Francis' first act was pray for me. And here he may not have said it in those words, but essentially that's what he was asking us to do, was to pray for him. And this, I've been thinking about this a lot. What happens to a man when you hear that you have moved? I mean, first of all, become a cardinal, but when you move to the fact that you're being told now you're Pope, there must be something quite extraordinary that's happening. And I'm so grateful that you're helping us to gain some insight into that. Let's look at your homily, though, because I think there is something there that happens with this, closeness and proximity to the person, but then this duty of responsibility that we have to shepherd. Where do you think you did that in this homily? Clearly there's the closeness you have to your brothers, and then there's the closeness you have to this woman in the symphony hall. But in terms of how you take it beyond that, how you take it to, this is the duty. This, therefore, is what we are invited to as a congregation, as a people.
Yes, yeah, I think finding a way to bring somebody from those experiences, and I do think in a world that is, and especially a generation of young people that are often filled with images of dystopia, and are disillusioned. It's, a lot of the things in which they're consuming are about, tragedy and war and difficulty and challenge and mental illness, and that's something in which their imaginations are being certainly fed with by no fault of their own. That's what's out there. So I do think there is a responsibility for us as preachers to ask them to imagine a better world, which is to imagine the reign of God here and now, and how they can do something in a very real, practical way. So not only to imagine what that scene was, but not to get caught up in the scene, to then move from that to say, okay, who maybe is sitting next to you right now that I have no idea what trouble or pain they're going through? And how can just even prayerfully, spiritually holding their hand, look for me in my world, in my home.
Let's stay with this hand-holding, and especially in the context that you're in, right? Sixth graders or even 12th graders. I can't imagine, not that I went to a single-sex school, but I can't imagine that it's easy for these boys to, show that kind of emotion, sensitivity. And so you're really taking quite a risk that maybe we wouldn't pick up on if this was just in any congregation. What are you trying to do there? Or are you trying to do anything? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, they are open to holding hands.
So it's a really good question. There is definitely that stereotypical, we don't show emotion, right? That they're certainly fed with. I do believe, and I think this works in our favor from an Augustinian community perspective, we do harp a lot on brotherhood. And what does it mean to lift your brother up? What does it mean to sit at the table with your brother who may be sitting alone? What does it mean to check in on your brother who's sick or not in school that day? Rather than presuming, oh, he's just slacking off, or oh, like he's just isolating, he's weird, or whatever else the world says. So the beauty of using an image like this, especially at the end of a school year, is you hopefully have done the reps everywhere else in the school community that it feels, yeah, this is what we do for each other. I mean, we've had even moments of our sister school. There is a student who is going through cancer and battling that. And 4 freshman boys came to me and said, hey, we would love to have a mass for her, completely optional, just to pray for her and bring her intentions, and we can invite her family over. She can't come though because she's in the hospital. And on their own, during their lunch period, these boys, for a person that they do not know, except for the 4 boys that came to me, these boys came, and we had over 200 boys during their lunch period show up to pray and to be there and to hold each other's hands during Our Father, which is a tradition here. So now, is it always, so wonderful in communion? No, I mean, they're still, teenagers. But the hope is that the culture, the example of the friars who are living this can, in some ways, inspire or model for them, hey, this is okay. And I think even by being vulnerable, and the hope is by giving permission, like, hey, I was having a homesick day. Like, I'm not held on a pedestal either. I was trying to avoid people too. I'm sure they're thinking, wow, all right. He's admitting that. Maybe I can embrace vulnerability in this way too. And to not see that as a form of being less human or less, of a man, but actually seeing that to being actually the most authentic human being that they're called to be, as loved and as someone who can protect and provide and care for and to do all those things that they are called to do as a brother that's in communion and in relationship with, rather than for or against or over or above.
Yeah, and I think that, it's that relatability that you spoke about earlier when you said, he's my brother. And it's like, well, I suppose he's my brother too. The way that you show yourself to interact with those around you and with the world is the way that they learn from. And I don't think it's all that different in our congregations. It's just a larger classroom, if you will. I worked in an Augustinian parish as a novice for about a year. And there's one phrase that stays with me that I actually went back and looked up. But there's a phrase from Augustine: in necessaris unitas, in dubis libertas, in omnibus caritas, which I think translates as in necessities unity, in doubts liberty, in all things charity, or as they said in the parish, in all things love. And I think showing this love in our deeds, to maybe mix metaphors or mix saints between St. Augustine and St. Ignatius, is so important. And you've really shown us how to do that. I wonder if I could ask you one final question. That is a tender one, but that is one that your experience in the Chicago Symphony Hall really brings to the fore, is many people are hurt by the church at its extreme, the sexual abuse crisis, but there are all forms in which people are affected and hurt by the church. I think that's also a way that we show ourselves as preachers and as shepherd. That we are able to speak out about those things in the context of the homily. How do you approach that? How do we address the hurts, the real hurts that people have, but don't leave them there, maybe help them to gain new perspective?
In some ways, in that moment, when she shared that, my first reaction was I should walk away or give her space or maybe not stay in that seat. Maybe that's causing more of a reminder of that pain. And I truly believe it was the Holy Spirit who was like, just stay right here. And not to explain it away or even to say anything, but I'm sorry. And in some ways that was enough, not to excuse or that did anything to remedy or heal those wounds in a complete sense, but to say, hey, I'm sorry. And to then stay in relationship, not in a way that feels forced or invasive, but in a way that says, I'm here. And if I'm not someone that you need, I can help you find someone that you need to work through that. And to know that the love that we've encountered as church, as broken as it might be, is a love that is so much bigger than that. And it's a mercy that is so much bigger than that says, yeah, we have a lot of work to do. And we ask for your forgiveness, and it's okay if you're not there yet. And I'm going to sit with you, if you'd like me to. And so I think that's the best I have at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, really to model something that is different is so important, and something that counters the negative experience that somebody has had. I remember fairly early on in my ministry now as a journalist, but I was asked to interview a victim of clerical sexual abuse. And I felt that I needed to tell her who I was, obviously. I wasn't just a journalist interviewing for a story. I'm a journalist, but I'm also a Jesuit. And that was a really difficult experience. She took me to task, but I stayed. And it was a very powerful moment, I think, for us both, just to have that experience of, okay, this is something tough, but it's something that we, and something that neither of us agrees with, right? That we're both sorry and was something horrible to have happened. But for us to be there in place of the church was so important. And I think you've done that for us, right? With you decided to stay, you preached with action, but then you also preached with words, even if those words were just very simple. And I think you've modeled that for us today. The simple lines and words you chose to communicate the message of today's gospel. It means so much. So thank you for taking the time to speak with us. I'm sure we're going to get to know a lot more about St. Augustine. So thank you, Bill. It's been a gift to be with you for this hour or so.
Thank you. Same here.
Thank you for listening to Preach. You can find the readings and a link to the transcript of Bill's homily in our show notes. This podcast is made possible by the generous support of the Compelling Preaching Initiative, a project of Lilly Endowment, Inc. Preach is produced by me and Maggie Van Dorn. Grace Lenahan and Leilani Fuentes offered production assistance. This episode is engineered by Frank Tewson, who also designed the theme score and composed the original music you hear throughout the podcast each week. Sebastian Gomes is our executive producer. You can follow me on X and Instagram at RickDSSJ, that's RICDSSJ. And while you're there, also give America Media a follow, at America Media. Also, please help us grow the show by leaving a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. If you love Preach, we have even more to offer you at America. Just go to our website to keep informed, even inspired about your Catholic faith. Subscribe today, americamagazine.org/subscribe, or click the link in the show notes. For America Media, I'm Ricardo de Silva. Until next time, happy Easter one last time, and keep preaching the good news.